Hello and welcome. Thank you all for being here today on this October 28th, 2021. I am Nick Knoke, the Director of Technology for the Asset Leadership Network, and I am excited for this program about asset management and leadership visualizations with David Albrice, who is founder and owner of Asset Insights Management. And we'll talk more about that in just a moment. But before we get the session underway, I just want to make sure to thank our patron sponsors, Definitive Logic, Onuma System, ABS Quality Evaluations, and ABS Group. We are really grateful for their continued support, as well as that of our organizational members. We could not do this and other programming without their support. And we want to especially highlight AIM, Asset Insight Management with David Albrice. And one last note before we get underway, one of our organizational members, the Andrew James Advisory Group, is launching an ALN A55K professional certification course starting December 6th. And there are only 4 seats available as of yesterday. So if you're interested, reach out quickly to the Andrew James Advisory Group or to anyone here at the ALN and we can direct you. And then last note before we get started, if you're out there watching, we would love to hear from you. So please participate in whatever way you feel comfortable, sending comments, questions, or feedback to the chat, or using the Q&A function of the Zoom webinar. Because we would love to get your input and make sure we can tailor the information in this program to what you're interested in. And with that, I'll say, David Albrice, welcome.
Thank you, Nick. Thanks for having me here.
Of course. I'm really excited ever since I started seeing your visualizations, your animations, maybe you'd call them, popping up in LinkedIn. I've been intrigued, and it seemed like a powerful medium to talk about sometimes complex, sometimes boring seeming, sometimes hierarchical, whatever you want to call asset management and the discipline, the field of management. I feel like what I was seeing from your productions, it really caught my eye in a way that a paragraph of text or even a few words never really has. There's just something about a visual, a moving picture that can express things in a way that's more understandable than anything else. So thank you for doing this work. And I'd love to give you the opportunity to talk a little more, introduce yourself to the audience a little more, and your work and why you do this and what you've seen the benefit of it is.
Well, thank you, Nick. I've always been passionate about asset management. I've been working in this space for about 30 years now. Started off with a focus on facilities as my asset area of expertise, but have moved across to full infrastructure asset management. And in that years, I've always really loved the subject, and I'm learning so much all the time, but it's frustrating me because I've noticed not everybody loves asset management. So not everybody is as passionate about the subject matter. And working with different organizations of different levels of maturity over the years, I've had to sort of educate people and help them understand what is asset management. And that's been the primary driving force between this visualization journey that I've been on. And I have a model that I call the 5E strategy that I think will help you understand my philosophy behind this. And it goes back to some of the comments you made at the introduction, Nick. So the first one is the 5E strategy starts with, the first E is engage. We have to engage people's minds. They say you got to get those eyeballs. We've got to get their attention. And then once you've engaged people, then you need to start to keep them engaged, or else you're going to lose them. The third E is educate. You cannot educate people until you have first engaged them, entertained them, then you educate them, then you empower them. Okay, so or enlighten and then empower and then evolve. So there's actually 6 E's: engage, entertain, educate, enlighten, empower, evolve. So you can see that we can't jump straight into education. We really have to get people's attention. And one of the things I've always enjoyed is the aha moment when you help people and you can say, now I get it. I understand. You put a picture on it that makes sense to me. So that's really been a big driving factor behind the evolution of my ideas. Now, There's also another framework, the ADKAR framework, which comes from ProSci. And that connects, I think, very nicely with my 5E framework. So the ADKAR framework is awareness, is the A, D is desire, K is knowledge, A is ability, and R is reinforcement. So in going through a change journey within an organization, you need people to be aware of why you need to change. They also then need to have the desire to change. So my 5Es tie into that first part of the ADKAR framework from ProSci for a change management journey. What I do is, a lot of what I do is asset management and change management. And I think a lot of my visualizations, they sit at the nexus of asset management and change management. It's that interface between those two disciplines that really gives us the momentum that we need to move individuals forward. It's not just awareness of individuals, but it's collective awareness within a department or within an organization as a whole. Ultimately, for the purpose of slowly changing the culture to help the organization realize value under the ISO 55001 standard. So there's my little summary background to my philosophy and the impetus for why I do what I do.
Awesome. Well, that was a great introduction and a bit of context for anyone, including me. You know, I knew some of that, but not all of it. Can you talk a little bit about what it is you do once, you know, you create animations about complex concepts to improve their understandability, to help convey that knowledge and information, to promote understanding? What work do you do with these? Do you see these animations going to C-suite people or other decision makers to help them understand why they should sponsor a program or a change management initiative or a new system? And what sort of benefits can you talk about that has come from this work, from your animations?
No, thank you, Nick. That's a good question because it gets to the heart of, well, why do this? Beyond just raising people's awareness. So training is about 10% of what I do. The other 90% of what I do is actual delivery, working with organization, real problems on a day-to-day basis. I like to consider myself more of a coach than a consultant. I would say that of the 90% of my deliverable, billable work, I would say probably 70% of that is coaching and 20% of that is consulting. You know, consultants are there to solve problems, they hand over a deliverable and they leave. And the organization now needs to operationalize that deliverable. That's a small part of what I do, but the bigger part of what I do is actually be embedded within the organization, work with and empower the staff and help them, work with them in developing a deliverable, whether it's a SAMP or an AMP or a risk framework. So the visuals have been very, very helpful in workshop facilitation is one area. When I'm meeting with a group of subject matter experts, whether it's folks in an engineering department or a planning group, or it's even IT, we need to convey and communicate to them what are the concepts that we're chasing after, and the visualizations are helpful in that one way. Communicating, they sort of set the baseline, set a common understanding amongst the group, and then we will have a workshop and we will work out whatever it is that we are chasing after. So the visuals are just, I will call them, they're a catalyst. That's what they do. They serve as a catalyst to trigger and stimulate conversation, the right kind of conversation, and then the video falls to the background, okay? And then now the conversation gains its own momentum based on the understanding and the composition of the group of people, the stakeholders that I'm meeting with, and then we continue. So it's a good, I would say in summation, a good catalyst. And you know, I've had folks who share the videos with each other, and we have this in two formats. There's another important point I want to bring out, rather than just the workshop facilitation as a catalyst for conversation. But there's also we have the videos, and we'll take a look at a few videos in a few moments to see some examples of them. But there's also posters. So here, here's an example of a poster. So let me explain the logic behind the posters. There's really two brands we have. One is what we call asset management in bite-sized chunks, and that's the videos. The other brand we have is what we call visualize to visionize the team. Now, the posters fall under that sort of visualize to visionize, and you know, they say that an asset management policy is a document that actually should sit in the reception area in the lobby of our corporate head office. And it should be on the wall so every guest who comes to reception can see the policy, what the principles are of the organization: risk-based decision-making, value-based decision-making, evidence-based decision-making, signed by the top management. That is a demonstrated commitment to the public of that policy. These posters serve a slightly different but similar function. They can sit in the staff lunchroom. They're on the wall. They're there to trigger conversations. They're there to demonstrate and help embed asset management principles into the culture of the organization. It's like having a conversation piece in the lunchroom. And some of the organizations I've worked with have done that. Like this one behind me, we'll take a look at that in some video version in a moment, is really a high-level structure of what is an asset management system and how we connect people, systems, data, processes, and assets in an integrated fashion. Because asset management is really about integration of many, many different things. Nothing in asset management is rocket science. It's all actually common sense. Where it gets very difficult is the integration of these many principles. That's it. Let me leave it at that. We can come back to that if need be further on. Thanks, Nick. Yeah.
I want to get into some of these visuals. I really liked your discussion of the videos or the posters kind of as a catalyst that then, brings up a conversation that takes on its own life and carries forward. So I would love to see some visuals for a catalyst for the rest of our discussion. But right before we get into that, I noticed Scott said something in the chat. I think it was a question about your slogan, visualize to visionize. Would you mind, my understanding is it's, visuals that aid shared vision across the team or the organization, aligning vision of whatever level of an employee or stakeholder to the organizational goals at large. But you want to talk more about that just briefly?
Yeah, no, thank you, Scott, for that question. You actually reminded me of something that I wanted to say a moment ago. One of my favorite quotes, Peter Drucker, a management consultant, he said, if you cannot measure it, you cannot manage it. Okay, so my version of Peter Drucker's famous quote is, if you cannot visualize it, you cannot visionize the team. Now, words are good, language is good, but I've been in rooms where people are talking about a concept. And I know that everybody in their head has a different visual of what that concept is until we put it down on paper. And I know from my own personal experience, when you have an idea in your head and it feels great, it looks good as an amorphous concept, and now you got to put it down on paper and now it completely changes and you see all the challenges. So visualize to visionize is about that. It's about how do we take those great ideas, the collective wisdom of all the people in our organization across all the different service areas, and how do we capture and codify that knowledge in either a picture or a framework diagram or a concept model. I love concept models and framework diagrams. We see a lot of them in asset management. In fact, because asset management is such a broad discipline with so many interconnected moving parts. We have the 39 subject areas. We have the 7 chapters of ISO. It's all those connections that really visuals help to bring and elicit those. The problem is no one visual can capture it all. It gets too busy. So that's why it's almost like a library or a suite of these visuals that come together. When I show you some of the videos, you will see that each video is trying to capture a nugget, some sort of nugget or one thread. And each of these threads of asset management weave together into the asset management fabric. At the end of the day, it's about a fabric. And that fabric is representing the culture of our organization and the services and the outcomes that we are searching for. And that fabric is woven through all these many asset management concepts.
Amazing. And I came from a physics background, and what strikes me is, well, where's the grand unifying visual, the grand unifying theory of asset management, where in one single visual, it tells you everything you need to know.
Yeah.
we'll keep
Yeah.
working.
Well, Nick, just as they say that in physics, they're trying to connect gravity with quantum mechanics, and right now they disconnect. In asset management, we have the same disconnects. We're struggling with, culture of organizations and structure of organizations, strategic, tactical, and operational. We have a lot of these disconnects going on in asset management. With that, those are the interlocks that we're all searching for.
Right. Yeah. And you were bringing it back to integration, and, it makes sense that there's these maybe silos, maybe just things that seem totally different, comparing apples and oranges. But, if you're talking about a bowl of fruit, you got to find a way to talk about all of it. So we could keep going. Let's see some visuals, have you talk about them a little bit, and see if that is a catalyst to spark some more discussion amongst our attendants.
Perfect. So I'm going to share my screen. Thanks, Nick.
Sure.
And what I've done, I've organized a few sample videos. We have currently published about 60, 70 videos. We have many, many more that we haven't published for reasons that we keep them for client use. But we're going to look at, I've got a few under so we have the 4 core principles of the ISO 55001 standard. So we'll look at value. We'll look at some video clips around leadership, alignment, assurance, and then depending on time, asset management systems and change management. So let's dive straight in. Let's look at how we can realize value in our organization in different ways. Because value is that one word we hear bandied about the most in asset management. And actually, it's the one word that we don't yet have a good universal definition of what it is. So let's use the visuals to try and unpack this concept of value. So the first thread I'm going to try to unweave in the fabric for a moment is how we realize value in different ways. So the first way we realize it is vertically through the different levels of our organization, the board or the council or top management, through the departments and the frontline staff. And so we have this vertical top-down or bottom-up flow of information in our organization. And you can see that it's an iterative loop. It continues to flow down and flow up. And we need to have alignment. Our board of directors needs to understand what's happening on the frontline staff. Why are the frontline staff being challenged? Likewise, the frontline staff need to understand, why does the organization have certain policies and strategic objectives, and how do they fit? Awareness is very important. How do I, as a frontline staff person, a boots on the ground person, when I put my wrench on a bolt and I do a maintenance task, how does that support the organization's objectives? Or if I don't fill out my record keeping, how does that undermine my organization's corporate objectives? So that's an example of how we would realize value vertically through the levels. Let's take a look at another little snippet. Here we'll look at how we realize value across the different stages in the life cycle of our assets. So decisions that we make during construction or design, the decisions and activities we make during operations and maintenance are going to have an impact on the life cycle realization of value of our assets. So I'll just go back a second. So as an illustration, let me jump back to here. So for example, when we identify the need for a new asset, when we pick the asset that we're going to replace our current asset, that is going to have a bearing on operating and maintenance costs and challenges. Likewise, the decisions and activities during the O&M phase are going to impact how long the asset is going to last, and whether we're going to realize the full life from the asset, or even be able to extend the life of the asset in some cases. So that's how we're realizing value, is another way, over time horizons of our assets. Let's take a look at the third way. And this one is very, very important. This is all about realizing value horizontally across the different departments or divisions or business units within our organization. We hear this phrase, functional silos, how each department is working in isolation, speaking their own language, and not necessarily interlocking nicely across the different service areas. We want to be consistent. We want to ensure that everybody within each of our service areas is following consistent frameworks, policies, and procedures. We're all in the same organization, so pursuing the same corporate objectives. Okay, so we saw very briefly how the videos are touching on vertical, realizing alignment vertically through the levels, horizontally across the departments, and over the time horizons of the assets. So that is an illustration. Yeah, so go ahead. Go ahead, Nick.
I want to interject. I'm grateful that you started with value for the first visuals that we're looking at here, because and it makes sense that value is one of the most, like you said, one of the most popular key phrases in asset management or whatever, because it's about how do we bring value to an organization? How do we improve the achievement of objectives and mission success through various systems or practices, like you say, change management, or any other of the pieces that are involved in asset management, stakeholder involvement, all of that. That's one of the things that drew me to the Asset Leadership Network, is we have this focus on value and how, asset management, systematic asset management, we talk about ISO 55000 most of all, and just the value that following a system like that, a structured approach, can bring value to the organization. So I just wanted to make sure we knew why we were talking about value, and
yes. And actually, thank you, Nick. I should clarify, those 3 clips that we looked at were about how do we realize value, but they didn't tell us what value actually is. It's the journey to realizing it. The value itself is actually an expression of our stakeholder requirements. So whether our stakeholders are regulators, customers, community living in proximity of our assets. It's about that optimized trade-off that we have to make as an organization to realize the different requirements of our different stakeholders. And that's really the expression of value. That's why value is so difficult to pin down. For some stakeholders, it's a financial piece. It's all about the bottom line of the organization. If I'm a shareholder, I'm investing in the organization. For me, value is the realization of a good balance sheet in the organization. But if I'm an energy regulator, or I'm an environmental regulator or safety regulator, I'm not concerned about the financial bottom line. I'm concerned about, either in the case of an environmental regulator, contamination of the environment. So those videos clips we saw a moment ago, let's take the one about realizing value over the life of the asset. By ensuring that our assets don't fail during their lifespan and we replace them before they reach that point of functional failure, we help ensure that we realize value for the purpose of avoiding contamination by an asset failing, and thereby satisfying the requirements of the environmental regulator. So it's important to understand the distinction between what is the actual value, financial, environmental, social, etc., versus how we realize it. And that is the connection piece that is so challenging in asset management.
David, I want to see some more visualizations here in a moment, but I just want to take a second to reference, yesterday we had a program with Mary Adams from Smarter Companies, and she was talking about 6 capitals and intangible assets. And I had heard about the triple bottom line, and I'd heard about ESG being this environmental social governance kind of alternative theories or frameworks of value that an organization can choose to recognize. And and then 6 capitals took it to a whole nother level. But just wanted to note here that value, maybe as a financial person, you're thinking only of the bottom line. Maybe as an environmental regulator, you're only thinking about the environmental side of value. But more and more, I think we're seeing that the most successful organizations are having, I hesitate to call it complex, but, many different ways of realizing value, and are valuing, all kinds of things outside of just the bottom line or the balance sheet.
Exactly.
I just wanted to
And
make
Nick, sorry, yeah, if I kind of add, and I want to clarify also the optimized trade-off. We're going to have to make trade-offs. That's one of the aha moments for me in my personal journey in asset management. Asset management actually recognizes you're allowed to make trade-offs, and you will make trade-offs so long as you can justify those trade-offs against your organization's objectives. Asset management doesn't say we live in a world where money grows on trees and you're going to have to satisfy everybody in the same way. Optimized trade-offs does not mean in equal proportions. So depending on your organization's objectives, you're going to have to trade off, like you just said, the environmental, social, and financial, or the people, planet, prosperity, or the ESG.
Yeah.
So it's those trade-offs that I think a lot of us struggle with because our organizations haven't yet articulated their objectives carefully enough, or have the KPIs to allow us to determine, have we truly optimized those trade-offs? That's one of the gaps I see in organizations. We know what we want to do, we just haven't quite gotten there because we have not yet reached the precision in our language and how we express our objectives to show that we're actually making optimized trade-offs. Yeah.
And on that point, you mentioned KPIs, key performance indicators. Is that
Yes.
that's okay? And so what I'm thinking about is a number of organizations. I think the Air Force presented on Tuesday about this. They have a bunch of values, objectives, and instead of making trade-offs, they say, every asset has a score in all these categories of our different values so that we can get a criticality, rating or whatever, and then say, okay, the highest critical things are prioritized first. I think that's one of the amazing values that a structured asset management system can bring, is helping an organization deal with a complexity and a multitude of stakeholder values and kind of figure out, okay, given all of the environmental, social, governance, financial, all these different values and across all these different assets, where should we put our money today? Where should, and how do we prepare for tomorrow? So that's really exciting to me because it's such a giant issue, and it's only getting more complex in a world that's more integrated and globally connected. And so it's great that there are tools out there like this, like what you're talking about.
Yeah, very briefly, Nick, I love that you mentioned criticality, because that is one of the best expressions of value, because really criticality is about the consequences of the failure of our assets. What are those consequences? Financial, social, or environmental? So by attaching a criticality score to the assets, you're actually expressing stakeholder interests. Right. Stakeholder requirements are baked into that criticality score. Right. And if you've done a good job, you've now codified your stakeholder requirements in your criticality score.
Yep, and I am really excited about the equity, the potential for asset management and asset leadership to advance equity, because in these structured and systematic criticality, ratings, it can get by some of the bias that has, humans are imperfect. And, that doesn't mean an algorithm would be perfect, but if we're aware and following, international consensus standards, we can be pretty sure that our criticality, whatever system we're using to triage essentially, or figure out where to go with our money today, is not just because it's the squeaky wheel or the loudest people or the people that have the most money that, the stakeholder, we're not prioritizing some stakeholders over other, or some values over others. We're just making decisions based on the organization's mission. So that's very exciting to me. And I'm excited by all.
So Nick, what do you think about, we've unpacked value for a while. Let's move to, how do you feel about moving to leadership, the second core principle in ISO 55000? So if you don't mind, I'm going to share my screen again, and let's take a quick look at just a few clips around leadership. So, leadership commits to a policy. So let's take a look at an excerpt from one of the video clips around policy. And let's Let me just zoom in before I activate the video. So what we're looking at here, this ribbon is actually, it's a road. It's the journey ahead for our organization. As you can see, it dips and it meanders, and it's like this for every organization. It's not, these journeys are not a linear path. So we had, let's watch a few seconds of the video. So we somewhere we're embarking upon our journey, and somewhere we're heading towards our organizational mission, vision, and values. And our policy is that first edge of the wedge, the fine edge of the wedge that sets that line of sight towards our mission, vision, and values. So we're looking for, as I noted earlier, risk-based decision-making, evidence-based decision-making. Now we have a whole bunch of other artifacts that come to play to support that policy. We have our strategy. Our strategy needs to align with the policy and help express that policy in a more tangible way. Then we have plans, and the plans are the next part of the evolution of how we're going to realize those policy principles. Frameworks and models. Frameworks, and using this analogy, the framework is like the frameworks, whether it's a risk framework or a decision-making framework or a capital investment prioritization framework. These are the vehicles that move us along the journey. The models that we use, how we calculate and score risk and criticality, how we calculate performance indicators like pairwise analysis, these are the models. And all of these are taking us along the journey, supporting the policy. And it's top management, it's the leadership of the organization that sets the policy principles and the commitment to those principles. So that's one of the first driving threads, if you will, from the ISO 55000 standard. The next one I'm going to identify is the clarity around roles and responsibilities. Let me turn the audio down. So it's very, very important for top management to ensure that we've properly resourced the organization to effectively deliver asset management. And here's another example of a little excerpt from a video clip around swim lane diagrams, just as a way to illustrate how important it is that we understand what each role is doing, what's the capacity requirements, how many people do we have, and how are each of these different roles in our organization coming together to achieve the outcomes. So on the topic of leadership, I just picked there two short excerpts. One is that importance of the commitment to the policy and having to the principles in the policy, whole life decision making, risk, whole life cost, risk-based decision making, stakeholder, recognizing the importance of stakeholders, and then resourcing that commitment, but through monetary resourcing and through human capital, having the right people in the right roles. So there's two very short little snips that I excerpted I thought might be useful.
Thank you, David. And thank you for bringing us to leadership. You've done great to go along with the themes of the web conference this year, value, leadership, and equity. I loved our discussion of value, and I think we couldn't stop there. We'd have to talk about leadership because there's value to an organization from structured asset management systems, and there's also values to leaders as individuals. It seems to me, because like we were talking about with the criticality index or these various decision-making methods, if you're following an international consensus standard like ISO 55000 and you're having all this data and you have various clearly stated missions of an organization, then it's very clear to show as a leader or decision maker why you've made the decision you're making or why you've headed the organization in the direction that you have. Because it's everything is transparent. You've written your missions out clearly, and you've got the data out there, and the data is saying, put into our valuation system says this is the decision we were making. So it makes perfect sense. And it takes leadership support to implement any of these systems and to change culture. And you talked about change management.
Yeah, Nick, can I add a comment? I've noticed in the work that I've done with a lot of organizations, something that I call the missing middle. So what I see with a lot of organizations is beautifully articulated mission, vision, and value statements. Beautiful asset management policy. It says all the right things, and it has the signatures of the top management. A nice high-level strategic document with all the motherhood statements and all the good things we want to achieve as an organization. But you go down a level and there's nothing there. There's nothing to help you convert those aspirations and link those aspirations that are happening at the top with the transactions happening at the bottom. So I refer to this as what I call the aspirational transactional hierarchy. So one of the challenges is, in some organizations I've seen that you have top management who's committed, they've set the policy, but the problem is now middle management needs to now develop the plans to execute down and draw that alignment. So when we're writing business cases on the front lines, those business cases can be translated back up to those aspirational statements. So there's a lot of challenges I see out there. So one of the one body of challenges is leadership not committed. That is a major problem. But I've also seen another group of problems where you have leadership committed, but then we have the missing middle, where you have the middle management that now needs to develop all those plans to link up to the policy and the aspirations and down to what's happening for the boots on the ground frontline staff. And that's part of that vertical realization of value vertically that we touched on in one of those video clips earlier on.
We had a question or two here, just briefly. What would you say if someone finds themselves in that middle place? What are the resources available to them? Can you speak to?
You mean an organization that has the missing middle? So they have the aspiration, they have the transactions being executed by intuitively. So we have motivated frontline staff who are doing things and they're getting stuff done. And we have management, we have top management with all the policies, but we don't have all the plans in place. So that's, developing these plans. Let's say you have 20 different asset classes. You've got to develop an AMP for each one. It is a horrendously time-consuming exercise. And the missing middle is really all about building up a family of AMPs that you need to have. So many organizations I work with don't have all the AMPs. They might have one AMP in one of the service areas, and they've now got this plan, okay, we've got 15 more AMPs we're going to have to write over the next few years. That is an organization that I call the missing middle. They don't have their suite of AMPs yet. Look, people are doing asset management intuitively in the meantime. People are well-intentioned in the meantime, but people are struggling to write business cases, and people are struggling to quantify the optimized trade-offs because they're missing those plans. Once they have those plans, then we get the calibration of that alignment that we're looking for.
David, there was a question from the crowd. What do you see as ideal qualities of an effective leader?
One of my favorite quotes is, the leader has his or her eye on the horizon. The manager has his or her eye on the bottom line. So, eye on the horizon. That is looking to, we saw in that video clip, the mission, vision, and values of the organization. The leaders need to know, where are we going? The leaders are not the ones who are actually going to execute on a lot of the stuff. That's the middle management, and that's the frontline staff who will do that kind of a heavy lifting. So leaders need to be vision oriented, and they need to understand what resourcing is it going to take to get us there. It's all well and good to have ambitious aspirations, and I've seen some very ambitious organizations. Oh, David, we want to be ISO 55001 certified by middle of next year. And I look at their maturity profile and I go, well, that is actually unrealistic. Okay, so we need to have leadership that recognizes the culture of their organization. So good leaders know the culture, which leads me to another one of my favorite quotes, again from Peter Drucker. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. Okay, so if you're a leader and you develop this beautiful strategy, but it does not recognize the culture of your organization, it is going to fail. You as a leader need to know, what is the organizational maturity of this collective of people that I am leading? Where are we on our journey? What is it going to take us to get us to that horizon? So I need to know the horizon and I need to know our current state. So I'm going to jump for a second to the language from change management. They talk about 3 states of change: our current state, our desired future state, and in the middle, we have the transition state. So a good leader knows how to transition, understands that interface between the current state and the transition state. Then all the managers and staff develop the transition state to move us to the future state. So I think I don't get too technical here, but the leader understands the 3 states of change, but focuses more on the current state and the desired future state, and staff work on that transition state. That's one way from my background in change management, that's one way I like to think about it. Each role needs to know, where am I? Am I a current state role or a transition state role or a future state role? And how do I fit? What's my profile within the organization? How am I helping us move across those 3 states of change?
Awesome. Well, I'm glad we talked about leadership, and I'm sure this won't be the last time we mention it in this session, because as we found, it keeps coming back to leadership, needing that sponsorship of leadership in an organization to make significant change, whether it's in culture or an asset management policy or anything. Why don't we look at a few more visualizations and kind of do a summation discussion before the hour here.
So why don't we move on to that 3rd core principle of ISO 55001, alignment.
Great.
And here we're doing things like connecting the dots between people, processes, and systems. And let's take a quick look at a few short excerpts from some videos. So the first one, so this video is looking at alignment, and there's so many ways we have to do alignment. We saw alignment from the top management down to the frontline staff. We saw alignment across the different departments, but there's many, many more. And this is why asset management is so fascinating and so challenging. There's so many threads to be woven into our fabric. So here we're going to look at a different lens on alignment. So what we're looking at here is looking at alignment across people, processes, systems, data, and assets. So we're starting with the, if you will, the bottom fundamental layer of our asset management system. Because ISO 55001 is it's a standard for an asset management system. And part of that system is really, one of the foundations is people, roles, responsibilities, authorities, and accountabilities. So let's take a look at where alignment is going to appear in a moment. So we need to align our people, our processes, our software, our data, and our assets. So this is another essential piece of alignment. And this is from a video that we developed to show what is involved in an asset management system, okay? And how do you connect those dots, okay? And ultimately, the assets that are sitting at the top of the structure, they exist for one reason only. An asset only exists for the purpose of providing value to stakeholders. Okay, there's no, if an asset, in this case we're looking at a valve, does not provide value, then we need to do a rationalization exercise and ask ourselves, do we need that asset? So let's take a look at, if I may, Nick, if you don't mind, let's look briefly at 2 or 3 very quickly other ways of looking at alignment.
Perfect.
Here we're going to look briefly at alignment across the strategic, tactical, and operational horizon. So we have our operational folks, our boots on the ground folks who are working every day on things. And we have at the top, we have, as you notice, right now we have the missing middle sitting here, and as you can see right now. But at the top, we have our corporate level executive folks who are thinking longer term. We have our operational folks who are actually thinking hour by hour, minute by minute, week by week. And then in the middle, we have our tactical horizon, where we might be thinking, for example, across the different seasons of the year, or the different fiscal quarters of the year. So here's another illustration of the importance of alignment. And if I may, Nick, just let me know if we run out of time. Another important one, if I'm going to quickly show us, is alignment across from the front line to the from maintenance to the balance sheet. We know we have a lot of folks working in the reliability space. A lot of people come to asset management bottom up from the maintenance domain, and they're all about, the reliability and uptime of our assets. Very, very important. But we have to connect that to the top-down flow, which is the folks who are looking at the bottom, the balance sheet of the organization. And sort of sitting in the middle, we have our capital planning folks. So we have the OPEX, the CAPEX, and then we have the TOTEX at the top. So this is where we need that integration and alignment between the balance sheet and individual maintenance activities that are going on in the organization. So there's another quick illustration of the many ways, and this is what is so amazingly fascinating to a lot of us about asset management. Very briefly, we'll just do quickly CAPEX, OPEX, and TOTEX. So we have a lot of people in our organizations who are working on operating activities. Typically maintenance, it could be security services, HR, etc. And then we roll up our OPEX into our CAPEX. And we can see on the left-hand side, something I should point out, here is our asset hierarchy. We hear a lot about asset hierarchies and how important they are. But asset hierarchies are not just about putting our assets into a nested hierarchy. They actually serve as a management system. A good asset hierarchy, which has our MMIs, our maintenance management items down at the bottom, and the organization at the top, will help us express our financial objectives, help us manage risk, help us manage our people, our human capital. So there's so much that our asset hierarchy can do, allowing us to drill down and roll up. In fact, many organizations I work with, the moment they get their asset hierarchy right, it cascades into so many other areas of what they do. It cascades across into financial management and risk management and the other things that are happening in the organization.
David, I love the term alignment, and I see it as essential and necessary and powerful. And I was wondering if you could bring it out of the clouds for us a little bit. Give us an example, say, about an experience you've had, or, just something to say, this is why alignment matters. This is why not everyone has alignment, even though it seems common sense that you'd want your daily operations to be working towards the long vision of an organization. But can you talk more about that?
I love it. Something real and tangible. Okay, I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to use record keeping as an example. Record keeping is the bane of people's existence. A lot of frontline staff, they abhor record keeping. And when they're told to do more record keeping, they just throw their hands up in the air. And so many organizations do a poor job of record keeping. Here's the illustration of alignment. When you tell the frontline staff, we're not making you do more record keeping because we want to make your job harder and make it more administrative and really frustrate you. We're actually making you do more record keeping because we want to make your life easier. And they go, explain. Okay. By doing the record keeping, we can do trend analysis. We can understand why the assets are failing. Without that piece of data, we cannot close the loop back to inform management where are the problems in our assets. Okay, so if with that record keeping, we can do root cause analysis, we can understand and unravel why assets are failing early, which are the good assets, so we can buy the right assets, the right equipment, go to the right manufacturers, and as a result, we are saving you time. So it pays dividends in the long term. And this is a huge problem in the asset management space. To get from that current state to that transition state, we have to go through some pain. There's a saying, no pain, no gain. Well, record keeping is the pain to get to the gain, okay? We don't want to go through the pain, so we don't do our record keeping. We never get to the gain. There's so many examples. Actually, I'm going to quickly do one thing. I want to show you one of the visuals about the pain to the gain. So I don't know how clear this is coming across, Nick, but what we got here is the concept of building a team. So Tuckman, a consultant, said to form a team, you got forming, storming, norming, and performing. So look what's happened. We form the team, we go through the storming phase. This is the pain, figuring out who's doing what, and then we're norming and performing. Every every practice where there's a journey, this pattern follows. Nothing goes from this dot in a straight line to this dot. You've got to go through the gauntlet first. Another example, okay? Return on investment. We've got to spend money, hiring staff, training staff, buying equipment. We have to get through the investing phase to hit the break-even point to get to the payback period. Notice the same pattern. Third one, the Gartner productivity curve, okay? We got to go, we have a new initiative, a new shiny object. We have a peak of inflated expectations. Then suddenly we get disillusioned. We've got to work our way through that disillusionment. So much in asset management fails because we have wonderful initiatives that we want to implement, but then we start to tackle it and we struggle. And people need to persevere. We need to be able to work with. So back to that alignment question. To get to those goals, the frontline staff have to do some heavy lifting, but they need to know why they're doing that heavy lifting. So I took a long time to get to the argument, to illustrate the point, but I think this is so absolutely fundamental to what I've seen in my career. So when the staff on the front line struggle to do the record keeping, maybe we don't have the capacity. Some of them say, I'm putting out, I have maintenance to do, I've got emergencies to deal with, I don't have the time to do the record keeping. Okay. Filter that message up the food chain back to leadership. Okay, do we need to bring in an analyst or some staff to support on the record keeping? This is where that loop goes backwards and forwards. If remember I said the top management needs to resource to ensure we can meet the commitment of those principles in the policy. And if frontline staff can say, we don't have the time, I hear this all the time, we don't have the capacity. Well, if you truly don't, let's get that message back up to top management. Now, there is a very real example, a real tangible example that I've seen hundreds and hundreds of times in my career, Nick.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Would you want to talk about the fourth core principle of ISO 55000? I believe it's assurance.
Assurance. Well, I'm going to share my screen again. Let me see what video I picked for us to look at. Where's my link? Assurance. Let's see, what have I got here? Oh, okay. Well, okay. So, we mentioned root cause analysis a moment ago. Let's look at a little excerpt from a video about root cause analysis. Such an important practice, because in order to uncover the barriers that are preventing us from achieving our asset management objectives, we need to know where are those problems. Now, when we look at and here we're looking at a visual illustration of a root cause analysis. Now, we're using in this video the 6 M's method of machine, materials, method, mortal, mother nature. And you'll notice that some of these 6 M's are around very physical things like aging assets or uneven loading on our assets or inadequate equipment. Now, I want to make a quick point, Nick, that's I think is very important to make about ISO 55000 and assurance. We are measuring performance of 3 things. We're measuring the performance of our assets. We're measuring the performance of our asset management system. And we're measuring the performance of asset management as a discipline that is embedded in our organizational culture. For those people who are all concerned about the performance of the assets failing, uptime, downtime, those are the folks who are very involved in what we call managing assets. We only get into that evolution from managing assets to asset management is when we start to think about all the other things, the people involved, the process involved. And this is where you look at the 6 M's method, we move across to method. So here you can see, for example, is the root cause of our problem inadequate staffing levels, inadequate plans, inadequate tools? So part of the assurance is doing the performance measurement and understanding what are the barriers that are affecting us from realizing those objectives and realizing value in our organization. So here's a quick, simple illustration using root cause analysis. Another way that we realize value, another way that we, ensure we have assurance in the organization is knowing that we have all the right frameworks and models. So we spoke a bit about risk management, how do we calculate risk scores? How do we calculate the criticality scores? We need to have defensible and robust models and frameworks to support us. How do we do our budgeting? And how do we translate OPEX and CAPEX into TOTEX? How do we monitor what kind of data do we have to support our analysis over the life cycle of our assets? Now, as you can see in this one visual here, there are so many things going on in asset management, and it's pulling together all these little threads that is the real challenge. I'm recognizing we're running short on time, Nick, so I'm going to stop there. Happy to elaborate and address questions from folks.
Yeah, one question came in about the difference between reliability and assurance. I was wondering if you could clarify that at all.
Well, reliability is one facet of assurance. It's the facet that connects to the assets, performance of the assets. So if the uptime on an asset is helping us determine how reliable that asset. But remember, there's three things we're measuring performance on: the assets, and that reliability connects in there. The asset management system is around processes and procedures. We could also argue, if a process is failing us, let's say we have a bottleneck, or we have what they call in the space of Lean Six Sigma, the term they use is waste, process waste. Do we have waste in our processes, inefficiencies in handover? We don't have good transitions between our OPEX team and our CAPEX team, or we don't have good transitions between our managers and our top management. All those connections we spoke about earlier, those all rely on processes. And it's the waste in those processes that are how we measure. One of the ways we're measuring the performance of our asset management system, which is about the people and the data. It's not about the physical, tangible assets, and that's the second piece. So the folks in the reliability domain will argue that reliability is about everything. Okay, fair enough. I won't disagree with that, but in my opinion, it's more principally connected to the performance of the physical infrastructure. Okay, where assurance is all three. Remember that third one. That is the key. That is the connection to culture. The third one is the measuring performance of how we as an organization have baked asset management principles and practices and operationalized that into our organization. That is the third and final element of performance measurement under ISO 55000. Those three together, how are we monitoring and measuring and reporting out on the performance of our assets, the performance of our asset management system, which is not software, it's the collection of all the processes and procedures that we use as an organization, and how have we culturally embedded asset management principles into our day-to-day activities in our organization.
Awesome. David, we're coming close to the hour here. I just want to take a minute to thank our sponsors, but I'm going to give you a preview. I'm going to ask you if you have a call to action for any of our audience or for future folks watching this to leave them with at the end of this. So
Nick. Yeah, no, thank you, Nick. Thank you so much for that opportunity. This is my call to action, folks.
Save it, David. Sponsors. And then
sorry, sponsors first. Sorry, apologies, Nick. Go ahead.
No problem. Yeah, so we just want to thank Definitive Logic, Onuma System, ABS Quality Evaluations, and ABS Group for supporting the ALN so that we can do programs like this, our annual web conference, as well as our newsletter and other programs. We also want to thank our organizational members, especially Asset Insights Management, for David Albrice's participation here today. And we're looking forward to doing more with all our organizational members, especially you, David. And then one more plug for the Andrew James Advisory Group's ALN A55K professional certification course starting December 6th. If you're interested in structured asset management, ISO 55000 specifically, like we've been talking about here, and the benefits that it can bring to any organization, reach out to the Andrew James Advisory Group or anyone at the Asset Leadership Network for more ISO 55000 professional development. And with that, David, I'll pass it back to you to offer a call to action and any closing thoughts you would like to.
Thank you, Nick. So this is my call to action. I publish these videos and these graphics because I have a deep passion for this subject. I love it. Okay, call me crazy. My wife tells me that I'm on the spectrum. She says I'm on the autism spectrum, and that's why I have this craziness about me. But you know what? I take that as a compliment. You know, being a high functioning autistic person, who cares? So this is my call to action. Engage with me in social media. Tell me what you like and don't like about the videos. Tell me what you make, suggestions, constructive critiques, offer ideas. I'm on a journey of continuous improvement. Every time I learn something new, my energy level just goes up. This is my energy bucket. So please engage with me in social media. I've been trying to put out about one of these videos a week. That's my plan, to continue to do them. I don't want to put out too many at the same time. I've got a whole bunch of them in my pipeline. Engage with me. If you like the videos, go to the YouTube channel, watch the videos, share them with people, disseminate the message, disseminate the passion. Help elevate asset management as a formal discipline worldwide. I like to think of, the project management domain through the Project Management Institute. I think asset management is where the PMI and project management was 20 years ago. Let's bring asset management up within the public awareness domain as a real serious discipline that has waters that run deep. Because asset management is a deep science. And with that, Nick, that's my call to action. Help us do that. Let's do that collectively as a learning society.
David, I love that you said you are on a journey of continuous improvement. What a great thing to be able to say. And I hope we all are and see that we all are, whether we like it or not. I would just echo that. It would be great if the country and the world were on a cycle of continuous improvement, and that if we could, the Asset Leadership Network, one of our primary goals is just that, to help grow this discipline and this body of knowledge that we think can bring so much value, not just to organizations or municipalities, but to nations and the globe. We would love to see this discipline grow in following and in value. And I think we made great strides towards that today. And I was very grateful to see a number of attendees here. So certainly I think you shared a bit of knowledge, insight, and passion and energy with them. And hopefully many people in the future will see this recording or bits and parts of it. We have had some calls about how to connect with you via social media, calls for your email and such. I think it makes sense to just send out a follow-up email with some resources, a link to your LinkedIn page, to your website, your email address, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, the two resources on the website, there's a whole bunch of these poster board visuals. You can print them. They're in high resolution, so you can print them yourself free of charge, and you can put them up. They're there for your pleasure. And the YouTube channel, it's all free content. I avail yourself of it and get back to me. Tell me how to improve it so we can make it better. So Nick, I want to thank you. I want to thank Mike. I want to thank the ALN and everybody else on the ALN so much for this opportunity to share my passion and to be part of you. I love that we're a family of kindred spirits, all working on the same path. So thank you so much for this opportunity, guys and folks. I really appreciate this.
Awesome, David. It was our pleasure. And for everyone out there, we'll catch you next time.